Happy Mother's Day. After that gospel, I thought maybe I should start by bringing out a serpent or two and doing a little bit of snake handling. But luckily, as Catholics, we don't take the Bible absolutely literally, so I ain't going to do that. I want to tell you a quick story instead. I was flying home a couple of weeks ago after a brief visit with our son in New York, and when we all lined up for boarding for Southwest, I happened to be in position A35, and I guess I should note that I always pay the extra $25 because I'm sick of being in the B and the C group. But you know, it doesn't always do you that much good, because on the way there I was A60. I was the last person in the A group. $25 out the window. But as we prepared to board the plane, there was a young family right behind me in A36, A37, and A38. It was a young father, a young mother, and a little girl who probably was about 2. She was young enough that she didn't talk much, but old enough that she had mastered the art of screaming and saying no. Now, you might be able to guess where this story is going, because 2-year-olds and airplanes do not mix. Now, luckily, I was sitting across the aisle and one up from them, and I was all the way at the window, so that generic plane noise that's always with you on a flight, it kind of covered some of the meltdowns. But I don't want to talk about my flight. I want to talk about them. A family stuck, spending hours in a confined space. Mom and dad with no power over what's happening. There they were, for a long time, surrounded by strangers, wondering why they ever thought it was a good idea to get on this airplane, maybe even wondering why they ever thought it was a good idea to have children. Think about how much easier life could have been. It seems like an ideal topic for Mother's Day, doesn't it? But what is a mother to do, though? Or a father, for that matter? You're stuck with a little kid who is at an age where they're supposed to be disagreeable. I mean, the reason the phrase "the terrible twos" was invented wasn't because somebody felt, like casting aspersions at a 2-year-old. They're bad. All of us who are parents have been there. Maybe not on a plane, but we were in plenty of stores and restaurants and churches when meltdowns occurred. And those of you who are parents, do you remember how that feels? I mean, you can't just sit by and ignore the screaming. Now, a 2-year-old may not know how to add and subtract, but they certainly understand when they have the mathematical advantage in a public place. Now, when I see a parent who's struggling with a child who is melting down, I usually try to smile, and I try to make eye contact just to let them know that I've been there, and it's not really as bad as it seems. As I recall, one of the things I would think when one of my kids was melting down is that other people might think I was a bad parent because I wasn't able to control my child. And it's true, some people did think that, the people who never had children. Everyone else knew kids can be jerks in public. That's part of their job. In those days, I think I rarely looked up to see, but I suspect that there probably were some elders who were trying to smile at me and let me know it wasn't as bad as it seems. I suspect that some of the parents who've been around campus these last few days probably are wondering where the time went, thinking it seems like just yesterday that they were feeling mortified while juniors screamed and demanded a particular breakfast cereal at the grocery store, or some useless toy that wasn't even going to make it to the car holding his interest. And now Junior has a degree in some mysterious discipline that allows him to understand the words in the ingredient panel on the cereal box that he was crying about 20 years ago. Now, parents, you could not control the meltdown years ago, and you don't have control over what happens now. You're kind of like the apostles. They watched Jesus get arrested. They heard about him dying. They couldn't see that because most of them had run away and hid. But then they heard he was alive again, and then they actually saw him, and now they feel like maybe they can get their feet back under them, and he's leaving. I wonder whether the apostles felt just a little bit like that little girl on the airplane She didn't understand why she had to wait in line or why her parents wouldn't put her down and let her explore and roam around. By the time she got used to being held and not screaming, then things changed again, because we got on the plane and then people were stopping to figure out where they wanted to sit, and they were putting their heads or their bags in the overhead bin. One guy put his head in the overhead bin. Never seen anything like it. But anyway, this little girl definitely was not amused. So what can you do? What do you do? And I think the answer is nothing. There's nothing you can do when a 2-year-old misbehaves on an airplane, because 2-year-olds are supposed to misbehave on airplanes. I guess her mom and her dad could have followed the advice that Jesus gave the apostles in the gospel today and tried in his name to drive out a few demons, but I'm not sure that's the right idea either. The only thing that mother and father could do, I think, is what they did. They tried not to lose their minds, and they waited for the flight to be over. They were like the disciples, standing there, looking up at the sky after Jesus ascended in today's first reading. They were helpless. They needed someone to lead them. And now Jesus was gone. And you know, I've always wondered about this Feast of the Ascension. I mean, not only was it literally called Ascension Thursday for the first several decades of my life, because as it says in our first reading, it was 40 days after Easter, and that would have been Thursday. But laying aside the fact that it's on the wrong day, I question, what are we really celebrating today? That Jesus left? I mean, I can see why we celebrate Christmas. God became human. And I can see why Easter's a big deal. God, in the person of Jesus, saved us from death by conquering death. I even understand celebrating Pentecost, when God's Spirit came, as a way to connect us to God. But Jesus leaving, why do we celebrate that? Well, on this graduation weekend at Wash U and on this Mother's Day, I wonder whether maybe what we're celebrating in the Feast of the Ascension is some of the same thing that we celebrate when we celebrate graduations and when we honor our mothers. One thought is that when he returned to the Father, part of what Jesus was doing was showing his friends that he trusted them. Earlier in the ministry of Jesus, he had to be like those young parents with their 2-year-old. His friends didn't always really get it, so he had to hold them, keep them from wandering away. But now he knew they could carry on. The same way our Wash U parents trusted their young adult children to carry on when they left them here for the first time, and continued to trust again each time they dropped them at the airport or the train station or on the South 40. Sure, when Jesus ascended, we believe his friends could still talk to him in prayer. Same way Wash U students could send a text message or set up a FaceTime or a Zoom call. But what changed involved letting go. Letting go. The parents on the airplane with me, they couldn't let go because their 2-year-old wasn't ready. But eventually, one of the main things parents do is let go. They let go again and again and again. A favorite spiritual writer of mine says the spiritual life is about letting go so that we're prepared for death's final letting go. And maybe that's part of what Jesus was accomplishing in ascending to the Father. After all, Jesus himself did a lot of letting go. He let go of his divinity to become one of us. He let go of his human life to save us from death. And then after the resurrection, he let go of these friends of his and allowed them to let go of him so that they could stand on their own feet. If you remember, in one of his post-resurrection appearances, Jesus says to Mary Magdalene, "Do not cling to me." Perhaps another way of saying that is, it's time to let go. Here at Wash U and the CSC, our job is not to create people who cling, like that 2-year-old on the plane that has to be held tightly all the time because she can't yet be trusted. Maybe what we celebrate today is that Jesus let go of his friends and they let go of him so that all of them could move on and do what they were called to do. Maybe the apostles never would have traveled all around the known world to spread the good news if Jesus hadn't let go. And maybe that little kid whose diaper you used to change wouldn't be receiving a degree in biology or engineering or business or social work or whatever if there had not been many letting goes. Letting go is difficult, but it's an essential part of growth. And that doesn't mean it's easy, and it also doesn't mean that we get to do it once and then we're done. There will always be more letting goes. After the apostles stood there like idiots looking up at the sky, they needed time to figure things out and to be okay with letting go of Jesus. But after a bit, the Spirit came and they did figure it out. I doubt they ever stopped missing the physical presence of Jesus, but they could feel that he was with them, especially in a sacramental way, even when they couldn't see him with their eyes. The same kind of thing happens when a parent leaves a child at school or a student watches a beloved mother get back in the car and begin the journey home. It hurts. But that pain in your heart and that lump in your throat remind you just how important that person is and just how much you love them. The hole in your heart never goes away, but you get used to letting go after a while, and you begin to know, just as the apostles knew, that even though you may not be physically together all the time, you're still connected. And nothing can change that. And then one day, when you see a 2-year-old melting down in a grocery store or on an airplane, you can smile and say, without ever even opening your mouth, I feel for you, Mom. I know what you're going through, Dad, but remember, someday that child won't be around to melt down like this, and you'll kind of miss it. So treasure it now and let go of the anguish that you feel. It could be good practice for all of the letting goes that await you. Jesus ascended because he knew that in some ways he could connect better with his friends and certainly could connect to more of them all at once from his new location. In ascending, he was absent, but he also became present to his disciples in a different way, the same way that kids can be present even when they're away at college rather than at home, or off now on a new job after being at college, the same way that parents were present to them when they went to school or moved away. In all those places, we have to let go. It's a prerequisite for arriving where we need to be. And I think maybe that's what we're celebrating on this Ascension Day, on this Mother's Day, and on this Graduation Day. Parents have to let go again. Students have to let go. Just like we did when we dropped them off at school.